With the challenges we witness in the world today, it's a fulfilling experience to see community and people coming together. Folktoria is one such event that celebrates diversity and culture within Victoria, BC. What can people look forward to at the celebration on June 1st to 2nd? How do folk dance and music unite the community? And what is Morris dancing? Let's find out on this episode of U Talk.
I'm Carrie Patriarch. I'm the current president of the Greater Victoria Folk Festival Society. And my background is general British Isles, but I think of myself as the Canadian component. I sing with the Victoria Nautical Song Circle's Sidewalk Sailors, and that's an international repertoire. And also with the Hankies, my two children and I sing together, and we sing Canadian folk songs.
I'm Pam Rudy, and I have Ukrainian background. My involvement with Folktoria has been for the past 6 years, and mostly involved with what's called Saanich International Folk Dancers, which is a group of people that meet recreationally and have done so for 52 years and do dances from all over the world, but largely concentrated in Eastern Europe. But there's the odd dances we do from French Canada or from Bolivia. We have one or two that may be from Japan. We don't know all 600, 700 or whatever number of dances we have, but we try to remember them and enjoy coming up with new requests on our regular Friday nights. When we get to the Folktoria, we'll be doing some selected dances and then hopefully bring in a couple of dances that we can invite people to join.
And I'm Elvin. I'm the treasurer for the society and also the dance instructor for the Norwegian folk dancers in Victoria. I've been with that Norwegian folk dance group since Expo 86, in 1986. That's when I started. So. And I'm also danced with the Saanich International Folk Dancers. And although my background is not Norwegian, it's German on both sides. I just got involved with Sons of Norway many years ago.
Hey, it's a great representation of the importance and amazing parts of these folk festivals, right? That you can participate and learn about various different cultures.
Sonia Gruel. I've been with the Greater Victoria Folk Festival Society since it first started. I worked with some great volunteers and people from different organizations to envision having the return of sort of bring that spirit back of Folk Fest, but it's now reformed itself into this new Folktoria Festival. I'm quite involved with the Punjabi youth community in Victoria and through the organization of Shane Punjab Dance, Performing Arts and Heritage School. And we celebrated 31 years on Saturday.
Congratulations.
That's amazing.
Thank you. When you have a show, you are focused on, the students and, and their items. But this year we actually had our first Bhangra party after. And it was amazing. Everybody has such a great time.
I know last time we connected, you were telling me about, you got a massive rainfall during the day of the event, but it was still fun nonetheless. How did last year go? I know you had a couple extra people, different spaces, or the area was being utilized a little bit differently. How did it all go?
Who wants to speak to that?
Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Performances are always awesome. That the community has so much to offer when it comes to showing different cultural dance and song music. The food's always a great attraction. And whether if it's good, it's really, really good for attendance. But there's loyal supporters, even if it's not such great weather.
Yeah, last year was amazing weather. It was warm and sunny, but there was lots of lovely breezes to keep everybody from frying. And we had a really good couple of days of community, capital C community.
That's the important part of events like this, bringing people together, forming those bonds and connections.
Yeah.
Is there a moment that really stood out to all of you?
Well, I mean, we had we had an incident which was a bit. It caused a lot of consternation for people. A protest that started at the legislature drifted through Centennial Square and a little bit took over the festival for 20 minutes. And although it was unexpected and I know unwelcome to some, it was actually very beautiful, and it was a input from our local Indigenous people. It was not just Indigenous people, but they definitely were carrying that flag very forward in their protest. So they came up on stage and sang a couple of songs and told a couple of stories, and then moved off. And it was really moving. It was especially moving because Gordie Dowd had just been speaking when they came on, and after he stepped down from the stage, so many of the leaders of this protest actually came around and thanked him, like vividly engaged with him about all of the good that he does for the homeless populations in Victoria. He's such a good man. He's really quite a wonder, and he's so unassuming. I mean, he has kind of silly advertisements featuring himself, but in every other way, he's just such a quiet spirit who just does good and doesn't look for a lot of recognition. So it was really lovely to just be there and be able to witness that.
Well, it's important at events like this to have Indigenous voices heard. You can't have a cultural or folk festival without the First Peoples of the land also represented there.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it was actually kind of magical.
Is there any other moments that stood out to the rest of you? Just a positive event overall?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, children bring a very special element to the festival because they're very spontaneous in how they react to what they see and what they hear. They don't have the kind of restraints. And so the younger the children, the more unrestrained and natural and spontaneous they are. So it's always a delight to watch them.
I think the other element too is the participation factors. A lot of groups last year, I recall, or quite a few did this participation where you would get involved, or you would just put on the music, people could dance after, or you'd learn a few steps, or the group would go on to the cement part in front of the stage and just engage with people. That I think was really, I thought was really touching and very engaging. And the other part that really stood out for me was we did have a few new groups. For example, the Wangshung group under Justin Lee did the lion dancing, and
cool.
So that was really amazing to have.
Touching on your point, Pam, when you're talking about getting the young and youth involved and seeing their reactions, you know, that's something that we're hearing a lot from different cultural groups and organizations, is getting younger generations involved. There's a big push now to ensure languages, cultures, and heritages are celebrated and preserved. I was having a conversation, what was it, just a couple of weeks ago with a group called Pan-African Legacy, where they're really working on getting children involved in their groups.
That's what I've been doing, Ryan, with our own dance organization. I think that's how you build your legacy, as you mentioned. And not even legacy, you build the heritage, the stories that carry forward from one generation to another. So that is something I've been doing for 30 years. And I think some of the groups I see are, they have older participants. And I think, I can't speak for everyone, but I think they do want to have younger members and participants and continue that as well. So that's one of the other wonderful things about Folktoria Festival is that we are showcasing cultural performances so that young people can see and can engage and can participate, and not just participate in the dances too, but volunteer, just come out and volunteer as well.
Getting people active, getting people engaged and want to learn and want to share. Because I think, especially with COVID, there's still, like, it's been several years now, and people are still hesitant to go to events sometimes. I know I speak with some young people and they're like, I guess I'm just going to stay home sort of thing. So like it's important to really invitalize people to come on out to see like, hey, come learn, share your culture, and build a sense of community. Because I feel, at least this is my perspective, some of the challenges that we're seeing around in Canada and around the world, I think is due to a loss of community.
Such a great point there, Ryan.
I'd like to point out that Sonia was maybe 20 when she started her dance school,
Yes,
right?
yes, Carrie, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah, so she was herself a youth when she started this. And I think that that's one of the things, Sonia's story should be inspiring to other young people who have a cultural impulse, that you don't have to have a perfect universe to make something happen, to make something really important happen, to make something happen that will have 30 years of life.
Yeah, a lifelong legacy.
Mm-hmm. So that's just very impressive. We're all a little bit in awe of Sonia and her accomplishments in this regard, because she has solidified a cultural moment, and yeah, you can't have culture if you don't have some people other than the gray hairs people in the mix. We've got to reach out, and we've got to foster that, and bring people out to see it, because sometimes people don't even know about folk music and folk dance and folk instruments. Some people are just they'd be so excited if they knew.
Exactly, bring in new ideas, new coverage, new energy.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Speaking of that, kind of getting that energy and excitement, what's new this year? What can people expect? Like, are there new food vendors, new performances, any changes? Let me know. What's going on?
Well, one of the things is, we have 3 different groups celebrating major milestones. One is the BC Fiddle Orchestra. They're celebrating 30 years.
Wow.
Yes, it's amazing, under Daniel Lapp. The other is the Morris Dancers, Trevor Hancock, Enid, some of these names, Sarah Kell. These are some of the names I know. I'm sure there's many more. And they're celebrating 50 years this year. And then there's the Wang Sheng the group under Justin Lee again. They're celebrating 30 years. So that's pretty that's huge.
Tons of major milestones.
So one of the things that's a little bit difficult about this kind of event is that it is not very much about new things. So and there is a pleasure in new things, but there is also a pleasure in knowing that you're going to come and see some lovely children dancing Bhangra dances, and you're going to come and see some beautiful Polish people really hamming it up, singing and playing their cultural music. And when you come, you know that you're going to be able to see the communities that you've seen before. That's very beautiful. I mean, it's not that we don't want and welcome novelty, but it's not what the festival is about.
It's about finding that balance, right? Bringing in new while maintaining and celebrating what has kind of been established within that celebration.
And, just that point of new, for me, some of us have been doing the Folktoria Festival for about 7 years. So we're in our 7th year. But every time you learn something new, though, and whether it's the same group coming back, but they're doing a different dance. They're talking about the lotus flower, or they're doing a different aspect of their culture, which every time I find I'm learning something new. So in the old, I'm learning something new all the time.
That's amazing. Yeah, you're right.
There's a tiny new thing that we're trying this year, and that's to get a couple of people to stand up together and sing a song that has a thread of sameness, but from different cultures. So we've decided to start easy and choose lullabies, because there's no culture that does not have babies that need to go to sleep. That's definitely something that we haven't done before.
Oh, that's going to be beautiful.
Yeah, but maybe next year it'll be joke songs where people get the rug pulled out from under them. So we're gonna try and find some other things to sing next year and the years to come.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing. I mean, You're right. People, they want to celebrate that amount that they've come to familiarize themselves with, coming out, spending time with great people, great music, great food. When we're looking at cultures and celebrations, I think it's incredibly important just to be aware of like what's happening in the world of people going against each other. And I think the folk festival is a great example of the unity that can be achieved through the diversity of human culture.
But we don't have any stakes, and that really is the case. Like it's impossible not to see that there are pressures on people that cause violence. But we're lucky in Victoria because we do live in a peaceful way. We don't have racial upheavals here. We don't have painful, or for the most part, we don't have painful relationships with people from other cultures. I know there's been some strife because people are people, but yeah, we've been very lucky. Everyone is so loving.
And in British Columbia, we also have the Multicultural Act. I'm not sure if that's in every province. So it's recognized that, we're the largest, well, not the largest, sorry, but like one of the provinces with the most immigrant people coming in. And in Victoria itself, there's a Canadian magazine that does a welcome ceremony for new immigrants in March every year. So I think I understand what you're saying about, what's happening in the world, especially what we're seeing and affecting people. But, our goal is tiny and small, but it's to really say, we all do care for each other, and with so many commonalities, and we can come together. So this is just an example, and in the words that you used too, Ryan, about diversity, inclusivity, this Folktoria Festival really embodies that.
Well, it's about those small moments. Like, even if it isn't massive change, you might be able to change someone's heart or mind when they see connections like that. And you never know what sort of ripple effect that can have in the long run as more celebrations and more diversity, inclusion, and just coming togetherness happens. You can't help but hope that it'll have some sort of influence on the world as a whole.
Yeah. With our post-festival or on-site festival survey option, that might be a good place for us to get perspective, story, short way for people to express if they've had that moment of, just enjoyment or however it's impacted them just to be on site.
Yeah, we got some great feedback last year. It was a survey I think Carrie created. It was amazing to see the report. It was wonderful to see the comments and things we could learn from.
Yeah, we still need more people to go and fill it out. So
that's the challenge, right? Trying to convince people to do a survey.
Yeah, well, we thumped it at them as much as we could.
Carrie, what were some things that you feel like really stood out when reading those surveys that you did get?
But that people really almost felt it was like food to come and have this kind of festival, that it was nourishing to their person, and that it made them happy in a way that is a little bit inexplicable. Like there's the level of happiness from it is very high, and that people loved. I mean, all of the things that we said earlier. People love the children, like seeing little children. You can't imagine how childless your life can be once you stop having children around you. Like it can be a very, especially now. I don't think it was always this way, because I think there were more children, and B, they were being dragged around by their parents more. But the truth is, it's lovely to be in the presence of a whole passel of children, and that we don't get to do that. So that, again, it feeds a kind of human appetite to be around children. And I know I sat beside one guy, I can't remember who was singing, but he was a recent immigrant from Romania, and he kept on elbowing me and saying, that's not how we sing that song. We sing it differently. That's really our song. And I just thought, this is really nice. Like he's taking ownership of what he's hearing, and it's, he's a little silly, but that's okay. Like he is really enjoying this, and he's sharing that what his culture is. And he was telling me the story of the songs, because often that's people who sing in another language often say something about it, but they give a précis. They don't fill you in on all of the subtleties. So he was filling me in, and it was just delightful. He obviously felt, and he had happened upon the event. He didn't know about it. He was just passing by and got sucked into the music. Yeah. So I think, yeah, the happiness quotient is very high at events like this, because it's not complicated, and it is a kind of nourishment that we don't even know we need. So it's like when you're thirsty, but you don't know you're thirsty. But then when you have a glass of water and then you need another and another.
Like, oh, I really needed that. Yeah, I get that. If you could describe the festival in one or two words, what would it be? And let's go all the way around. How about you, Melvin? Let's start with you.
Definitely multicultural and volunteer driven.
Multi-generational comes to mind.
Culture joy.
Gosh, a few words. Community. Just respect of people and the uniqueness of diversity.
So it really sounds like for people who come to this event, they really find a warmth, and as you're saying, Carrie, food for the soul, almost.
It's a beautiful thing. It's a shame that Folkfest passed away, because it was 7 to 10 days of this. The stage was always full. It's always full of people dancing and singing and carrying on. It was beautiful. But yeah, at this point, we're happy to have this one going well, and I think hopes for the future are maybe other kinds of cultural events, similar, maybe smaller, because this one's expensive to run. But to try and take the 10 days that was Folkfest and sprinkle it through the year.
That'd be good. So it's not just all at once. You get a cultural experience the entire year.
Yeah. And so, if we ever manage to get the federal funding that might be available to our kind of event, that's probably what we'll be shooting to do, is to find ways to have hot points of cultural diversity instead of huge swaths of it.
So if someone is wanting to find out more about this upcoming event, where can they go, and when does the Greater Victoria Folk Festival start?
Well, Folktoria starts on June 3rd, and so it's June 1st and June 2nd. We have a Facebook page, which is pretty easy to find. You just look for Folktoria, and there it will be. Melvin's our webmaster, so he knows about that.
And we're certainly going to put up some sandwich boards on the fringes of Centennial Square. So tourists that are walking by will say, well, oh, what's this? A sandwich board, the point with an arrow saying, enter here and come in. It's a free festival too. It's just, so people can just walk in, see what's happening, and see what, one of the surprises of Victoria, saying we didn't know this was happening here.
Not just the tourists, but people who live here but might not have heard about it in any of the other methods of promoting. So the sandwich boards we haven't done before. That's something new. Hopefully that will be a good outcome from use of them.
We've got more in store for you today with a participant who's been performing Morris dancing for years at Folktoria.
Well, my name's Trevor Hancock, and I live here in Victoria, BC, on the unceded territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and I am a Morris dancer. I'm currently 75 years old. I retired as a professor of public health some years ago, but I've been a Morris dancer for 40 years or more.
As I've connected with Folktoria and other organizations across Canada, there's always these unique and exciting different cultural practices and celebrations and dances that take place. So for our audience who might be unaware what a Morris dance is, What is it, and kind of what is the history about it, or as far as you know about it?
Well, Morris is the traditional English folk dance, rural folk tradition for the English counties, and particularly in the West Country, but also across basically what would have been the old Anglo-Saxon areas. We know it dates back to at least 1448 because there's a record of the Goldsmiths Guild or Company of Goldsmiths in London paying the Morris dancers 7 shillings to be in their parade. And now 7 shillings in those days would be about $350, $400 today. So obviously it was a well-established tradition in 1448. We don't really know its origins. And it's been danced primarily in villages. And so within Morris, there's several different forms of Morris. There's what most people think of as Morris dancing is Cotswold Morris, comes particularly from villages in the Cotswold Hills to the west of London. And that is traditionally with flowered hats and colourful waistcoats and bells and ribbons, bells on our legs. And the dances are a combination of stick dances and hanky dances, largely, with flourished white hankies. There's another form of Morris called Border Morris that comes from the English counties along the Welsh border. And that used to be danced traditionally in blackface, but of course that's no longer acceptable, although it had at the time nothing to do with race. It was a form of disguise, but nonetheless, people obviously don't do that today. So, but a lot of the border dancers wear dark or black clothing and painted faces. And it's a more sort of energetic, aggressive dance in some respects. And then there's a style called Northwest Morris. And there's also an English sword dance, very different from the Scottish sword dance. So there's a huge richness of English folk tradition, which by and large, people around the world didn't know about, because I suspect that the English colonialists really didn't want to display these sort of rustic native quote unquote dances in front of the people who they had conquered and were governing. So it's often a surprise to people in many parts of the world that there is an very old traditional, indigenous, if you like, English folk dance tradition.
That's been something I've been really intrigued with in learning about different folk traditions across the world, particularly in Europe, because, oftentimes we have kind of a homogenized view of what Europe is in terms of their just aesthetics and things. But when you go back, see the folk traditions and folk clothing widely different. Like when we're just looking in Ukraine, some of the various different regions in there, various different influences in their costumes and clothing and jewelry. Just saw a video not too long ago about one of Bulgaria's traditions. I can't remember what it's called again, but it's one of their only traditions that has survived Christianization. And it's so interesting, wearing these elaborate masks and clothing with fur and dancing around. And it's something that you're like, wow, this is not what you would necessarily expect from Europe in what we kind of perceive as Europe today.
Well, that tradition that you're talking about in Bulgaria, all across Europe is a tradition of Wildermann in the German, wild man or green man. I'm actually a green man too. I was recently at a festival in Hastings in the south coast of England that I go to every year called Jack in the Green. Which is, again, a very old tradition, and essentially, at its heart, pagan. And of course, one of the things we forget about Europe is, first of all, it's a very old culture, or set of cultures that have been around for thousands of years. But secondly, until relatively recently, how little people traveled, people who lived in the country. They might not travel more than 20 miles from their home in their entire lives. And we forget that in this age of instant and easy travel where we think nothing of going 100 miles. But back then, that was a massive journey. So traditions were very localized. That's why, for example, if you go all across England, you have very, very distinct accents within a few miles of each other, because people were not moving. They were pretty much rooted to their spot. Their traditions evolved and their accents evolved very locally. Every style of Morris, for example, within Cotswold Morris, every village had its own style, its own costume, its own style of dance, its own dances. So we talk about dancing Bampton dances or Adderbury dances or Headington Quarry dances. Well, all of those were villages where particular styles evolved within a few miles of each other.
And I think that's the exciting part about events like Folktoria, that it provides an avenue and a place for variety of cultures to come in and share their folk traditions with each other in an atmosphere of celebration and learning.
And I think that's really important. And certainly Folktoria and the International Saanich International Folk Dance Society, which has been around for more than 50 years, they're about that. So part of the point of participating and showing our dances is that we are not only celebrating our own culture, but we're learning about other people's cultures and celebrating that. I've never forgotten, some years ago now, we went to England, one of my Morris sides. I danced in two different sides. And we found ourselves outside Lichfield Cathedral in the west of England doing a dance with, and there was a group of Maasai dancers from Kenya there. And so there we were, we taught them a dance and they taught us a dance, and we were dancing each other's dances in front of the cathedral. And then because the bells started ringing, we went around the corner, and somehow in talking with them, I mentioned our tradition of folk singing, because there's a very strong English and British folk singing tradition. And they were astonished. They said, "You sing?" and so we sang for them and they sang for us. And so it's a wonderful melding of cultures and showing your own culture and being proud of it, while at the same time seeing other people's culture and respecting it and enjoying it. I think that's hugely important. I think that groups like Folktoria, events like Folktoria, have a much deeper benefit than we perhaps realize in doing that.
We're starting to see that a lot of different cultural organizations and individuals wanting to reconnect with their cultural upbringing. A lot of immigrants, I'm talking about here in Winnipeg, but a lot of immigrants now are like, hey, you know, we're like third, fourth generation now, and it feels like we've lost, you know, our connection to where our forefathers and our ancestors came from. So there's a lot of efforts to reclaim cultural practices, cultural languages, cultural dances. And I think that's an exciting thing that we're seeing, of people being like, hey, let's celebrate the diversity. Let's connect with those backgrounds, because oftentimes there is a little bit of a homogeny in Western cultures where like things feel like, when you're looking at like Canadian culture, you know, there's the multicultural aspect, but when you're trying to think of something that's exclusively Canadian, it kind of feels a little, I don't know, like vanilla at times.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think certainly in the case of the side that one of the sides I dance with, Holly Tree, here in Victoria. Holly Tree is actually celebrating its 50th anniversary this year.
That's so fantastic.
And it's actually the oldest Morris side in Canada, along with a Morris side in Winnipeg called Village Green Morris, who were also set up in 1974, it turns out. Holly Tree was set up by a couple called Christine and David Wynn. David was the squire for many years. The squire is the name given to the leader of a Morris side. And David sadly died 10 years ago. But Christine is still dancing. She is 83 or 84 now, and she comes out every week. We have another dancer or two that are in their 80s. We have at one point, Fred, one of our dancers before COVID, was still dancing at the age of 92. Holly Tree's been around a long time, but Christine and David set it up because, having been involved in international folk dance and having co-founded Saanich International Folk Dancers, they got interested in their own English tradition and went and learned about Morris dancing and brought it back and started a side here in Victoria. Initially called the Victoria Morris Men, because traditionally Morris was thought of as a men's dance, but it really probably never was, and certainly not since the big Morris revival in the 1970s where there are certainly men's sides, just as there are women's sides, but a lot of sides are, and we call them sides. That's a word for a team, just like a cricket side, football side. But a lot of the sides are both are mixed, men and women.
It's so cool to see cultural revival and people celebrating it. And once again, like 50 years for the Holly Tree out in Victoria, that's incredibly an amazing accomplishment.
Well, and we have, as I said, I'm 75, and I'm not the youngest dancer, but I'm sort of in the middle of the pack. And so I do all the pitching, the talking to the audience for our side, and I always tell them, that Morris is the secret of a long and healthy and happy life. I say that with a smile, but at the same time, I actually think there's a lot to it. When you think about and in the proclamation that the city of Victoria has made for Folktoria, they actually talk about, or we talk about, because we wrote the proclamation, of course. I took it directly from Saanich International Folk and Folktoria, where they talk about both the cultural benefits, the multicultural benefits of Morris dancing, but we talk about it's physical exercise. It keeps you healthy. You have to be strong and agile. You have to both learn dances, which is good for memory, and memorize them, but also we create new dances. It's a living tradition. So the Border Morris that I spoke about, only about a dozen dances were recorded before the dance essentially pretty much went extinct in the early 20th century. There are hundreds of Border Morris dances now, but they've all been invented since the 1970s. So it's within the style, it's within the tradition, but it's like all good traditions and strong traditions, it's a living tradition. It evolves, it changes. For sure, we don't dance Morris the way it was danced in 1448.
And I think that's also exciting. We had an interview, someone coming down to our studio to talk about Indian dancing. What was it? Bollywood styles and cut. I can't remember the other style, but it's like a classical style with more Bollywood modern style, and combining those, like preserving the historical aspect while taking aspects and creating something entirely new. Exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's essential for any folk tradition. They grow, they evolve, they modernize, and so they should.
Yeah, and then another aspect of that is like not only the exercise, the memorization, and the preservation, but it's building that sense of community, not just within cultural circles, but within the broader community of Victoria for Folktoria, but Canada as a whole. Whenever we have these multicultural festivals, people learning from each other, building community, and I think that's an important aspect that since COVID, we're still struggling trying to rebuild those community connections.
Yeah, and those are incredibly important, and certainly within the group itself. I mean, one of the obvious benefits of Morris dancing, like any other team activity, is being a team, being together. So we go to the pub after practice every week and have a beer and talk, which is what would happen in England too, and lots of other places. And that's an important part of the well-being that comes from it. It's physical well-being, mental well-being, but also social well-being. But then being able to share that with the wider community. And as I say, the example of the Maasai dancers is a beautiful example of that. You sing. Like, who knew? Who knew the English had a folk tradition? Because the English, I think, really kept it quite quiet. Everyone knows about Irish dancing and Scottish dancing. The Welsh, incidentally, almost don't have dancing because the chapel pretty much stamped out folk tradition, dancing and singing, back in the days of the Puritans and the Presbyterians. And so there isn't much that survived there, but they do have their Eisteddfods, for example, which are poetry and song. But no, people know Irish and Scottish dancing. They didn't really know English dancing. And so the chance for us to say, yeah, we have a folk tradition too, is really important.
So Trevor, what are you looking forward to most for this upcoming Folktoria event?
Well, this one's a bit special for us. We've danced in it every year for a number of years, but because it is our 50th, because we have been able to get the city of Victoria to issue a proclamation, not just celebrating Holly Tree's 50th, although that is part of it, but celebrating international folk dance in general and Folktoria in particular, and Holly Tree. So there'll be a proclamation issued. And for us, it's also a kickoff event because Holly Tree is having a series of 3 dance outs over the summer with our other local sides and with visiting sides from Seattle and visiting sides from Vancouver, so that we can celebrate our Golden Jubilee together. And to do that, we've changed our costumes. So we have gold-colored hankies. We wear ribbons on our arms. Well, that we've put gold ribbons on our arms, gold laces in our shoes, gold sprig of holly in our hats. So we're sort of making a whole thing of it.
Wow, that sounds absolutely amazing.
It is, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
For people who are interested more about learning about Holly Tree, the upcoming 50th, and this celebration that are coming up over the summer, where can they go?
Well, I hate to say it, but we don't have a website.
Oh, no.
We don't have Facebook. Probably their best bet is to get a hold of me personally, and my email is greendoc, GREENDOC, @telus.net. One of these days we might catch up to the 21st century, but we're not quite there.
Hey, there's always the opportunity to attract younger folk who are interested in learning about these folk traditions and utilize some of that tech savviness.
Yeah, we would love that, and we do have younger dancers too. I shouldn't say we're all elderly or everything. I think our youngest dancer in the border side I danced with, which is called Quicksbottom, our youngest dancer is about 20.
Well, there you go. You've got some young folk that you can utilize some of their abilities.
Absolutely.
Have any stories you'd like us to share or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.